I was sitting at my desk late one Tuesday afternoon, fighting the familiar slump that always hit around 4 o'clock, when my phone buzzed beside my keyboard. I expected another email notification or some random app alert, but instead it was a text from my younger brother, Ethan. For a split second, I smiled out of instinct, because no matter how distant things had become between us, some part of me still hoped that one day he'd reach out with something warm. That hope evaporated the moment I opened the message. "Don't come to the BBQ on Saturday. We talked, and you don't really fit in anymore." I stared at the words, unblinking, as if the meaning might somehow change if I looked at them long enough. My coworker Jenna glanced at me from over our low cubicle divider and asked if I was okay. I forced a tight smile and muttered that everything was fine, but the truth was, something inside me had cracked in a way I hadn't prepared for. My name is Nora. I'm 28, and being invisible is something I've spent most of my life excelling at. I wasn't the difficult child, or the loud one, or the one who required extra attention. I was the dependable kid, the one who solved her own problems. I grew up understanding that the less space I took up, the easier things were for everyone else. My brother Ethan, on the other hand, was the family's gravitational center. Charming, impulsive, endlessly adored, he was the one people rallied behind. When I moved 2 states away for a job 2 years ago, my family barely reacted. My mom said, "Nora's tough, she'll manage," which was her favorite way of excusing the fact that she hadn't asked a single question about my new life. It wasn't that I was bitter. I had long accepted the dynamic. But the exhaustion of always being the afterthought had settled into my bones. So when Ethan's text arrived, telling me I didn't fit in, it wasn't a surprise so much as a final confirmation. Still, I typed back and asked what he meant. His response came almost immediately. "You're just different, busy. Mom said it'd be awkward if you showed up." Awkward. As if my presence would somehow contaminate the family air. I walked outside my car and called my mother. She answered with a sigh, already annoyed before I even spoke. She said I worked too much, that the BBQ was for family who showed up, and that Ethan needed support. When I tried to explain that I had been working hard to build my life, she cut me off and repeated that I was fine on my own. She ended the call before I could reply. I sat in my parked car, listening to the quiet hum of traffic, my phone resting in my lap like something that had suddenly become too heavy. It struck me sharply that this wasn't just a small gathering. It was our annual family reunion, the childhood ritual, the tradition. And they had decided that I no longer belonged in it. Later that night, my younger cousin accidentally added me to a planning group chat filled with messages about the reunion. Before she realized the mistake and removed me, I saw everything. Ethan talking about how I never brought anything to the table, my aunt complaining about how I had changed, my mother saying they should just focus on people who cared. I took screenshots and left the chat quietly. No one noticed I was gone. The next day, my father called, and for a moment, I allowed myself the hope that maybe he hadn't known. But he simply told me that my mother was right, that I had chosen my career over family, and that I shouldn't be surprised if they moved on without me. Then he hung up. On Saturday, the photos began appearing on Instagram. Ethan's wife posted smiling pictures of everyone wearing matching shirts, gathered around the grill, laughing with their arms slung around each other. The caption read, "Nothing better than family who stick together." Every relative was tagged, except me. I felt the kind of stillness that comes when sadness burns itself out. There were no tears left. I simply closed the app, opened my laptop, and returned to work. And that's when the clarity settled in. The clarity that comes when you finally see people without the fog of hope. The clarity that says, stop trying. They are telling you exactly who they are. What they didn't know was that 7 weeks earlier, I had been promoted to senior project lead at my consulting firm. I now oversaw project approvals, partnerships, and investment evaluations. One of the proposals waiting in my inbox came from a small hospitality group, Greenstone Hospitality, which was partially owned by Ethan's wife's brother. At the time, I hadn't connected the dots, but now everything aligned with a sharp, unmistakable click. The following Tuesday, I received a meeting request. Partnership review, Greenstone Hospitality. Attendees included 2 senior executives, myself, Ethan, his wife Lauren, and their business partner. They were pitching a major expansion deal, and they had absolutely no idea I was the one leading the meeting. When Jenna asked why I looked like I had seen a ghost, I told her everything: the texts, the exclusion, the group chat. She listened, then told me they clearly had no idea who I had become, and maybe it was time they found out. The morning of the meeting, I dressed with a quiet, deliberate confidence. Charcoal blazer, crisped blouse, hair pulled back, the version of myself no one in my family had ever taken the time to see. I arrived early, arranged my documents, and placed my nameplate at the head of the conference table. And waited. At exactly 10, the door opened. Ethan walked in first, laughing with Lauren and their business partner. When they saw me, the laughter died instantly. Lauren's face drained of color. Ethan froze. Their partner looked confused. Lauren whispered, "Nora? What are you doing here?" I calmly gestured to my nameplate. "I'm the senior project lead overseeing your proposal. Please have a seat." The silence that followed was thick and pulsing. I began the meeting without acknowledging any of it. I walked them through the weaknesses in their proposal: the inconsistent financial projections, the vague marketing plan, and the underdeveloped risk mitigation strategy. Their partner attempted to defend the numbers, but Ethan kept glancing at me with increasing panic. Finally, he said, "Come on, Nora, you know us. We're good for this." I looked him in the eyes and said, "Do I?" The tension in the room tightened like a rope. Lauren leaned forward and said, "We're family. Family helps each other." I tilted my head and replied evenly, "That's interesting, because last weekend I didn't feel very supported." And before anyone could interrupt, I placed my phone on the table and said quietly, "I saw everything." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I simply stated that my decision was not personal, it was professional. Their proposal was incomplete. They were welcome to revise and resubmit in 6 months. Ethan tried to apologize on the spot, but the meeting was already over. I closed the folder, gathered my notes, and walked out of the room without looking back. Once inside my office, I closed the door and allowed myself one long, shaky exhale. Relief washed over me. Not triumph, not revenge, just release. The weight of years loosened. That afternoon, Ethan texted a short apology. I didn't respond. The next day, my mother called 3 times, and I sent every call to voicemail. A week later, Ethan sent a long message filled with explanations and regret. I read every word and finally replied, "I need space. Please respect that." For years, I had waited for them to see me, to acknowledge me, to invite me into the place I had always been trying to belong. But that meeting showed me something I should have realized long ago. I don't need their table. I built my own. And when I finally sat at it, confident, steady, unbothered, I realized I wasn't missing anything. Their silence wasn't a wound anymore. It was freedom.